to me in order for me to alternate between the two. So without further ado, I will then pass over to Ignacio. Ignacio is the professor of Consejería de Educación y Ciencia de Historia. Ignacio, over you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It is an honor for me to participate in this forum. Before I start, I would like to thank the organization committee for their invitation. I am going to talk to you today from my experience in the NGO Iniciativa por el Asturianu, which works in a network with ELEN, European Language Equality Network, at European level. I think that talking about my language is a good example for what is happening with many other languages in Europe. As you may know, Asturian is a Romance language which is spoken in a strip of land running north to south and surrounded by the linguistic areas of Spanish and Galician Portuguese in Spain and in a small area of Portugal. Owing to the progress of Spanish and Portuguese in this territory during the last several centuries, the further to the south one looks, the narrower the strip becomes and the weak the legal recognition of the language. Throughout the 40-year dictatorship of General Franco, language spoken in the Spanish state, other than Castilian, faced prohibition and repression, even in the last years of the regime, when punishment was soft and they were tolerated in certain areas. During this period, the use of this language in public environments and names of campaigns, places, and people was banned by the law. The schools were the place where linguistic repression was experienced most intensely in Asturias and León. The aim was to send children and to transmit to society that the language was nothing more than just poorly spoken Spanish. What set apart the situation of Asturian from that of the rest of the language present in the Spanish state during the period was limited consciousness of its speakers, of the fact that there was actually a language, as well as the linguistic activist movement which could be confronted. This poor linguistic self-conscience prevented Asturian people from having the possibility of defending themselves against the aggressions. Collectives and people working for the use and promotion of Asturian language who could have developed into the role of when it's raising had been devastated by the civil war. Some of their members had gone into the exile or died, while others had to be incorporated into the cultural institutions of the regime. The arrival of democracy brought about a change in the treatment of language in Spain. The 1978 Constitution reserved a minor role for language other than Spanish, but the Asturian language did not achieve official status, only minor protection. Since then, we have had many problems in exercising our rights as speakers, problems in dealing with administration, the impossibility of educating our children in an educational system in Asturian, and a long list of situations that occur every day. If we take a look at the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Minorities, we can see that most of the articles are still not being complete within all the territories where Asturian is spoken. In fact, Asturian is today a minorities language with a steadily decreasing number of speakers and significant trouble moving ahead with the 21st century. Despite certain remarkable advancements accomplished by the civil society throughout the last 30 years. These include a minimum legal recognition, much broader social awareness, a number of fields in which the language has penetrated with considerable success, especially considering its sociolinguistic situation, like music and literature, the media, primary and secondary school, technologies, etc. With this pyramid, I want to explain how languages are protected in Spain, as there are different classes or levels of status. Will the speaker of Castilian have all their rights guaranteed in the whole Spanish territory? The other languages only have a lesser level of protection. The more fortunate communities, whose languages are recognized as official languages, Catalan, Basque, Galician, and Occitan, have a higher level of protection. Those that have only a lesser degree of protection, such as status of autonomy or protection law, such as Asturian or Aragonese. The worst part goes to languages with protection, without protection, in Ceuta and Melilla, Extremadura, and other areas. The Spanish state favors this connection between language communities when they are in different autonomous communities. Moreover, the status of language is not the same in each territory. Some of the official languages are not official in all territory. Asturian, for example, is taught at school on a voluntary basis in Asturias, or Miranda in Portugal, but cannot be studied in Leon. Rights are not respected, inequalities are enormous. An activist movement and social awareness regarding the existence of a native language appeared in the late 1960s with Amigos del Bable, and especially from 1974 onwards with the creation of Concello Bable, a socio-political association aimed to defense of Asturian language and political autonomy, with whose eventually success in modifying the approach to the language question. The autonomous communities where nationalist sectors were highly influential quickly approved their status of autonomy, which introduced the official status of their respective native language. In Asturias, the activists called for a decree for bilingualism, which led Asturian to become an official language de facto before the status of autonomy of Asturias was written and approved. However, only the word Asturian be incorporated into such a basic legal document. The project for the status of autonomy of Asturias, which was approved by the pre-autonomous corporate body, the Regional Council of Asturias, was sent to Madrid only a few months after the coup d'etat of February 1981. Although the military coup has failed to succeed, it would eventually contribute to declare the pace of decentralization with the intention of satisfying reactionary groups who were reluctant to this process and had been in favor of Antonio Tejero's attempt to restore the military dictatorship. When the project was examined by the Spanish Parliament, the status of the language was significantly reduced. Although the first draft had defined Asturian as a specific language of Asturias, the definitive version did not specify what Asturian is, naming it also as Bable, a term with negative connotations. Despite the continued claims for the legal recognition of the language from Europe and international bodies to modify its legal situation, as the European Charter for Regional or Minority Language, is also contravened. This agreement was signed by the Spanish government in 1992, although it would not be ratified until September of 2001. Almost a decade later, Portugal has signed the charter recently, as the last year. In Asturias, we have experienced several attempts to make Asturian official. The last one was a few months ago. We are only one vote away from 27 needed in the Asturias Parliament for the recognition official of our language. In any case, it is time to establish the mechanisms that will allow the Declaration of Minority Rights to be a useful tool for minorities. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights needs to take a more active role in defending the rights of linguistic minorities. We have a linguistic community aware of the danger and active in its defense with organizations such as Iniciativa por el Asturiano, Faceira, or Reciella Familias por el Asturiano, and institutions such as the Academia de la Lengua Asturiana, working to achieve a future with more rights and more protection for our language. Our language, like many others in the world, is in danger, and we need as much international support as possible. Finally, my recommendation for the language issue as a rights for minorities are as follows. Carrying out an exhaustive study of the situation of each European language, to know the state of its use, the opportunities and rights of its speakers, and of course, the shortcomings in its freedoms. Establish source standards that allow an effective comparison of the situation of the language, as well as establish objectives that can be recommended or demanded to the state members. In order to achieve this, it is necessary to involve the group of speakers of such language. And finally, create an emergency plan for the safeguarding of language, which could aim at significant improvement of the rights of European linguistic minorities in the next 15 to 20 years. Declarations of rights are very symbolic and useful in terms of rising hours of problems, but they need to be actively addressed. Thank you for giving us a voice in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Well, thank you to all our esteemed speakers, and I know that we all received a kind of a concept note for this event, and I feel that quite a few of the questions that were posed to us by both Tom Lantos Institute and the Special Rapporteur, they